Hello and a big welcome back to the Wee Larder channel. Today I'm going to be making 3 delicious recipes from Aberdeen. So Aberdeen is my hometown, although I don't actually live in the city. I literally live in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by sheep. So I've picked these 3 classic recipes from Aberdeen. The first one is for a traditional Scottish buttery from Aberdeen, and of course an Aberdeen recipe video wouldn't be complete without a buttery. So I'm going to be filming how to make a buttery and Aberdeen Toffee. My dad used to talk about my granddad eating a lot of Aberdeen fudge. Although this is not a fudge recipe, it's quite similar to that, and it's really delicious. And an Aberdeen Softie is my third recipe. So a softie is just like a really soft fluffy bun. So we love Aberdeen Softies. You can have bacon and eggs in them, sausages. They are so good, and you can get them in most bakers in Aberdeen as well. So it's a real traditional recipe to Aberdeen. So those are my 3 recipes. I hope you enjoy them. Let's get started. First of all, on our traditional Scottish Aberdeen buttery. So for our traditional Aberdeen butteries, also known as Rowies in the town, we're going to need 25 grams of fresh yeast, 240 ml of lukewarm water, 460 grams of plain flour, 2 teaspoons of sea salt, 160 grams of lard, 160 grams of butter, and a tablespoon of caster sugar. If you can't get your hands on fresh yeast, you can actually use dried yeast as well. So you want to divide the quantity by 3. So you're looking at about 7 to 10 grams of dried yeast if you want to use dried yeast. I like to use fresh yeast, but if you only have dried, that's totally fine. So we're just going to dissolve our fresh yeast into the water here. So we've got our piece of fresh yeast, but if you're using dried, you can just dissolve it in exactly the same way. I just find that fresh yeast is just more reliable for my bacon, but it's completely up to you, and obviously whatever is available in your area as well. So if we just dissolve the yeast into the water and just set that aside, and we're just going to sieve all of our flour into a mixing bowl. Now, I actually need to invest in a larger sieve here. I really am running out of space. So this just helps get any lumps out of the flour. So it does take a couple of minutes, but it is worth the extra effort. And if you have a bigger sieve than me, please feel free to use that. So once that is all sieved through, we're then going to pop in our salt as well. So we're just going to pop that through the sieve as well, just so it's nice and fine. I like to use sea salt for my salt in all my recipes. I just really like the flavour. So if we just pop the salt through the sieve, and we add in our sugar into our flour mix as well, and we're just going to give that all a really good mix through together, just so that it is all completely blended in before we add in our yeast and water mixture back into the flour. So we're going to do that now. We're just going to pour it into the flour, and we're going to start making our dough. So if you just put all of your yeast and water in and just scrape out any extra bits of yeast from the jug as well. And if you just mix in your yeast into the water, into the flour rather, and then with a spoon, and then we're just going to get stuck in with our hands. You can actually use a mixer with a dough hook if you have one. My KitchenAid was actually broken at this point, so I've just been making things with my hands. But I've actually really enjoyed making things with my hands. It's been really quite an experience. So you're just going to form this all together with your hands to make a dough, and we just want to knead it for a couple of minutes as well. I speeded it up here and cut out a little bit of the kneading time because it is like about 5 to 10 minutes. So you just want to get a really nice smooth dough, although it will be a little bit sticky, but that's okay. And you just want to make sure there are no lumps and that it's all completely blended together as well. So just knead away until you have something that is smooth and slightly elasticy. And then we're just going to put a dash of olive oil into our mixing bowl here, and we're going to add our dough back into the mixing bowl so that we can leave it to rise. So if you just spread the oil around the bowl here, you just need a little bit, and I've just used olive oil. You can use whatever you have to hand. And we're just going to form a ball with the dough and pop that into the bowl. So I'm going to cover my bowl with cling film. You can use beeswax wrap if you have that. It's a little bit more environmentally friendly. You could even use a clean tea towel as well. I like to use cling film just because that's what I have to hand. So I'm going to completely cover it and I'm going to pop it over my cooker, which is a nice warm space for it to rise. So just pop it wherever is warm in your kitchen, and we're going to leave this for about an hour. So it does. What we're looking for is it to double in size like this. So this is an hour later and it's a nice spongy dough. It's risen up to about double the size and it's just really quite stretchy, and this is the texture and size that we're looking for. So next we're going to blend our fat together. So we're going to blend our butter with our lard. Now this is a lot of fat and it does put people off this recipe, and it's not the kind of thing that I would personally make all the time because of the quantity of fat in it. But it's just something nice to make for a treat, and it's just nice to experience the traditional way of making things as well. So if we blend that with the fork and just get stuck in with your hands if you want to, I find it easier to blend with your hands once it gets a little bit warmer. And then if you just smooth it out in the bowl, and then we're just going to mark it into 3 pieces because we're going to do this recipe in 3 parts. You can actually do it all in 1 part if you have a massive workspace, but because I'm using a smaller chopping board, I like to split my dough into 3 sections. So I split up the risen dough into 3 sections here. And we're just going to start by flouring our chopping board and then adding on our first piece of dough onto the chopping board to roll out. So if you just make sure you've got enough flour in there, not too much and not too little, and just scrape any excess away to the side that you can use while you're rolling. So if you can also add a little bit of flour onto your rolling pin as well if you feel you need it. So we're looking for a rough shape here. We're just going to roll this out into a triangular shape or like an oval. It doesn't really matter. You're just looking for a really rough, long rectangular shape. Butteries are not in perfect shapes when you buy them in traditional bakers. They are a real rough shape, so you're not looking for any kind of perfection here. So just roll it out into a large rectangle. Now it does bounce back a little bit, this dough, but that's okay. Just stretch it out as much as you can. And as I said, if you've got a bigger workspace, please feel free to do all of the thirds, just the dough as one big piece and the fat as one big piece. But I like to split it into 3 because it makes it easier. So we're just going to take 1/3 of the fat out of the bowl. And we're going to start by dotting the fat over this piece of dough. So you're basically going to repeat this for the remaining 2/3 of dough and the remaining 2/3 of fat. So I'm going to show you how to do it this first time, and you can go ahead and do the other ones yourself. So if you put about 1/3 of what you have in your hand here onto the dough, it doesn't need to be in any kind of neat circular shapes or anything, just dot it on, and then we're going to fold that over and fold it over again. And then we're just going to roll that out into a large rectangular shape, again a similar shape to what we had before. We're going to repeat the process with the fat. And just add on any extra flour that you may need if it's getting a little bit sticky. Sometimes some of the fat kind of bulges out a little bit, so just put some extra flour on if that is sticky and in the way. So we're just going to dot a little bit more fat on, probably closer to like all of the fat now that we had in our hand there. I've left a little bit for the third fold-in. So we're just going to roll that out again and add on the remaining fat, whatever you have left, and just roll it out into a long kind of shape, and we're going to split that into 3 and just pull them out so that you'll have rough circular. So if you just make them like this and put those aside. So we're going to go ahead and make all the remaining butteries in exactly the same way with the 2 remaining pieces of dough and the 2 remaining sections of fat. It's until we have about 12 butteries. And we're going to leave those butteries to rise for 30 minutes, and then we're going to pop them in the oven at 170 for 15 minutes, and then turn the oven down to 150 for 10 minutes. and you should have something that looks like this. They are so crispy and delicious, and I have actually seen other recipes that use more fat than this, but this is the quantity of fat that I like to use when making a buttery, and it's kind of how I remember a buttery to be made. So it really, really works. It's super delicious, and they are super doughy, and they're really nice for breakfast or for like a snack. And they keep well as well, because obviously they were made for going out to sea, so they keep for a long time. So our next Aberdeen recipe is our walnut fudge, and we're going to be using 225 grams of caster sugar, 100 ml of milk, 60 grams of butter, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1 tablespoon of golden syrup. Now this recipe is like burning hot lava when you are making it, so please bear that in mind if you have little ones going about. I like to make these types of recipes when my little one is asleep. So we're going to start by greasing up a medium-sized tray. We're just putting plenty of butter in there so that our toffee doesn't stick to the bottom. And we're basically just going to put all of our ingredients into our pan. So we're going to add in our sugar. We're going to add in our milk and our golden syrup and our butter. And a dash of vanilla essence as well. So we're just going to melt that all down on a medium to low heat. We don't want anything too hot at this point, and we just want to melt all the sugar together and all the butter. So we just want to melt that all into a liquid form. So just keep stirring on a medium to low heat until it has completely melted. It does take a couple of minutes, but just keep stirring at that temperature. We don't want to heat it up too high at this stage. So once it has all completely dissolved together, we're then going to raise the heat to a boiling temperature. So we want quite a high temperature on the hob to get this up to boiling. So we're going to boil this for about 10 to 15 minutes roughly, but really the best guide is when the toffee forms a very soft ball on a cold plate, or you can use a cup of cold water. Like here, you can pop a little bit now and again into a cup of water to check that it forms a ball. In this case, it wasn't ready, so we've set that aside. But my favorite way is just using a plate. So if you just keep stirring at boiling, and it's very important to keep stirring because it can stick to the bottom, and take a little bit and then pop it onto a plate, and when it's ready it forms like a soft ball. So you give it like a minute or so on the plate, and then it should be really soft and squishy in your hand, and when it's soft like a soft ball, then it's ready to pour it into the pan. So you want to keep stirring this as much as possible. I actually stopped stirring for a minute or so just to fix my camera, and it stuck slightly to the bottom, so you can see some brown flecks in here. The toffee was actually completely fine. So this is the soft ball you're looking for, and when it gets to that stage, if you take it off the heat like this and just beat it for a couple of minutes or so, and then we are going to pour it into our pre-greased tray. So this sets very quickly, so if you pour it into your tray, I like to use quite a big tray for this because it does create quite a thin toffee then. So this is like a pull your teeth out type toffee, and you don't want it too thick because it makes it very difficult to chew. And if you have any loose teeth, I wouldn't advise eating this at all actually. So when it's still in liquid format, we want to spread it out first of all, but then we want to sprinkle our walnuts in as quick as possible so that they stick to the toffee. You can also use small pieces of chopped cherries as well. That works really well, or maybe chocolate chips of white and dark chocolate chips. There's a few variations you can pop on the top here, but I like to add walnuts in. I just think they're really nice and crunchy with the toffee. So we've popped the walnuts on, and we're just going to leave it for a minute or so, and then we are going to use a large knife to slice it into the shapes that we want. You can make them quite small pieces or quite large, but you want to do this before it completely sets, otherwise it makes it difficult to cut it at all. So I'm just cutting it into quite large kind of squares, but because it's quite very sticky toffee to eat, it's quite good to make small squares out of this recipe as well. And that works really well, but this is the kind of size I'm going for. So that's our toffee ready, and it really just takes a few more minutes before it is completely set. You can pop it in the fridge as well if you want to harden it up a little bit more, and you can pop it into an airtight container. So our next Aberdeen recipe, and our last one, is for an Aberdeen Softie, and we are going to need 300 ml of water, so that's warm water again, 20 grams of fresh yeast, 470 grams of plain flour, 10 grams of salt, 25 grams of caster sugar, and 40 grams of lard. And we're going to start this recipe again by dissolving our fresh yeast in our water. So again, if you're using dried yeast, you can use a third of the quantity there. So 20 grams, you're looking for about 7 grams of dried yeast if you want to use dried yeast instead of fresh yeast. So if you just use a whisk to dissolve it, and then if you just set that aside, and we're going to start adding our flour into our bowl to make our dough. So if you pop all of your flour into the sieve, again, I am definitely needing to upgrade my sieve to a larger size. So we're just going to sift all that through into the bowl, and it just helps get all the lumps out and to make a smoother dough. So we're just going to pop all of that through the sieve there. So it does take a minute or so, but it is worth the extra effort. So once you have done that, we're going to make a little space here, and we're going to add our lard and the rest of our ingredients in here as well. So if you pop the lard in, and then your salt, and your sugar as well. I didn't get that on camera, sorry about that, but you do add your sugar in here as well. And then we're just going to pour our yeast into that. So we're just going to scrape any extra yeast out of the jug as well. So we're just going to start by mixing all of this through with a spoon again and again. You can use a mixer with a dough hook if you have one. If you just set it on a medium to slow speed for a few minutes, and it'll do this nicely. So if we mix all that through with the spoon, and then we're going to get stuck in with our hands to form the dough. So very similar to making the butteries, we're just kneading the dough again for a few minutes in the bowl here. So we're just going to knead that for about 5 to 10 minutes. We're just looking for like a smooth, elasticy kind of texture in our dough. If you need a little bit of flour when you're on the chopping board, you can add a little sprinkle in, but it's really important to try not add too much flour to this dough. So we're just going to knead this as much as we can until it is nice and soft and elasticy. So if you just form a nice neat ball with your dough, and we're going to add a little bit of olive oil into the bowl here. I actually went a little bit over the top with the olive oil there. You only need a small amount in the bowl. So if you just spread that around the bowl just to make sure that it's all covered so our dough doesn't stick when it's rising. I like to just cover the dough as well. We're just going to cling film this and pop it into our warm place on top of the cooker again. So I love using top of the cooker for rising and also for my ferments as well, because it's always so warm there, because the cooker is on in my house a lot throughout the day. So there always seems to be a warm spot to pop it on the cooker. But if that's not a good spot for you, then you can pop it somewhere else where it is warm in your kitchen. So the back of the cooker is perfect for me. So our dough has doubled in size, and we're just going to sprinkle our baking tray with a little bit of olive oil again, just to grease it up for putting the dough balls on. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to make 12 buns with this dough. So you can make 12 small rolls with this, or you can make 4 large softies with this. It's entirely up to you. My kids like the little rolls, but we like the huge softies, so I wanted to make them both just to show you what you can do with this recipe. And we're just going to make a small ball with that and just roll it in our hands and then pop it onto the tray. So we're actually going to leave these to rise for 30 minutes before we pop them in the oven. So we're going to leave those to rise for 30 minutes in a warm place. So once our rolls have risen for 30 minutes, we're going to pop it into the oven at 180 for 15 minutes, and that's a fan oven temperature as well. And we should have our nice little rolls ready after that time. So they're not too brown on top, which is exactly how we want them, and they're totally cooked inside, and they're really nice and doughy when you cut into them when they're fresh, and they're nice and soft as well. So you should have something like this. So they're nice and fluffy and soft inside, and they're really nice with butter fresh out of the oven as well. They're so super doughy and delicious, and my kids absolutely love them. So I used exactly the same batch of dough and exactly the same recipe to make 4 large softies, and I basically just made 4 huge buns like this, set them to exactly the same way, set them to rise for 30 minutes again, and then popped them into the oven. And these came out like this. So these are super delicious. They are so huge and they are so soft and fluffy, and they have a slight crust on them as well. They're really, really nice. So you can make the small ones or you can make the big ones. The big ones are more like the traditional softies that I know of, but I like the small ones for the kids as well, so I thought I would just make those for you too. Now these are super doughy when you cut into them, so you might want to give them a minute or two to cool down, so they are a bit doughy inside, but they are really, really delicious if you have them in the morning with breakfast. So we love to have these in the morning served up with bacon and eggs and ketchup. So if you want to go for that kind of thing, then all you need to do is slice one of your huge softies, or you can use a mini one as well if you want to do that. And these have actually cooled a little bit here when I'm making this recipe, so you can see it's not so doughy inside. And they are so soft, you can try and spread some butter on it. It's a little bit tricky because they are like super soft, but once you have some butter on, you're going to want to sprinkle some ketchup on there and add on some freshly cooked bacon. And you want to load this up, and this is like such a huge breakfast sandwich. You can actually share it amongst 2 people. I actually fed my kids with this breakfast sandwich and they loved it. So I've got 2 fresh eggs there, and there's nothing better than a runny egg in a softie bun. They're so, so good. And those are our delicious softies. If you want to pop over to my website, you can actually get all of these Aberdeen recipes on my blog, so you can print them out from there as well.
So I hope you enjoyed making these Aberdonian recipes, and I hope they gave you a taste of Aberdeen. I'm sure you'll agree the buttery is definitely the most delicious of all 3. It is so, so good. If you take any photos, please feel free to tag me on Instagram. I'd love to see them in my stories. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more traditional Scottish recipes, seasonal family recipes, with a sprinkle of Irish recipes in there as well, then please feel free to click that subscribe button. And if you click the little bell next to it, you'll be notified when my new videos come out in the future as well. If you want a copy of my free cookbook, you can pop over to my website, angiemilne.com, and punch your email in the cookbook section, and it'll be sent straight to your inbox for free. And it has 10 of my favourite delicious traditional Scottish recipes in there. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope to see you all again soon. Lots of love. Bye bye.